The autumn sky hung like a dome of burnished copper over the small town of Ravenwood. Rain fell in a gentle cascade, transforming the asphalt into a broken mirror that reflected the yellowish glow of the street lamps. Eleanor Hayes tightened her grip on the silver medallion her grandmother had given her before passing. Its familiar weight against her palm brought back the old woman's final words. "When you feel afraid, Eleanor, hold it tight. What is inside you is stronger than any threat from without." 15 years of excavating ancient sites across 3 continents hadn't prepared her for the unease she felt returning to this place. At 35, Eleanor, Ellie to the few who knew her well, had built a respectable career as an archaeologist, specializing in ancient symbolism. Yet here she was, abandoning tenure track to take over her late Aunt Helena's antiquarian bookshop in a town that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. 2 months in Ravenwood had earned her little more than polite nods and brief exchanges. Tonight's Harvest Festival in the town square was her latest attempt to shed the outsider label that seemed permanently attached to her name. The festival grounds glowed with string lights crisscrossed overhead, creating a canopy of artificial stars. Long wooden tables laden with autumn bounty formed the perimeter of a makeshift dance floor where couples swayed to folk music played by a small band. The air carried notes of apple cider, roasted meat, and freshly baked pumpkin pies. Ellie paused at the edge of the gathering, observing the complex choreography of a community that had danced together for generations. Children darted between groups of adults while elderly couples watched from benches, their weathered faces reflecting decades of shared festivals. "First time at our Harvest Festival?" A woman Ellie's age approached, her smile genuinely welcoming beneath warm brown eyes. "Sarah Jenkins. I run the bakery 2 doors down from your shop." "Ellie Hayes. And yes, though not exactly. I came once as a child with my aunt." She left unspoken the complicated history that followed. Her parents' reluctance to visit Ravenwood, their insistence on moving far away, their eventual deaths in a car accident that had always felt suspicious. "Well, you're here now. Come on, I'll introduce you to some folks who won't bore you with talk of corn yields." As Sarah led her through the crowd, the band transitioned to House of the Rising Sun by the Animals. The familiar tune, a favorite of her father's old record collection, sent a shiver of recognition through Ellie. The melody carried notes of warning that seemed oddly appropriate for the evening. Their progress halted as a sudden hush fell over the gathering. The music continued, but conversations died as heads turned toward the entrance to the square. The man who commanded such immediate attention moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to authority. Tall and broad-shouldered, he carried himself with military precision despite his civilian clothes. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves revealing forearms corded with muscle, and a well-worn leather jacket. His dark hair, touched with silver at the temples, framed features that might have been handsome were it not for the scar running along his left jawline and the intensity of his gaze, eyes the color of a winter sky, penetrating and watchful. "Gabriel Thornwood," Sarah whispered, her tone mixing respect with wariness. "Owner of most of the land around Ravenwood, including that old Civil War estate on the hill. His family founded the town back in the 1700s. Ellie watched Gabriel exchange brief greetings, noting how each interaction carried a subtle deference from the townsfolk. "Is he the mayor?" Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Ravenwood doesn't need a mayor when it has a Thornwood, though officially he's just a prominent citizen who happens to employ half the town through his various businesses." Gabriel made his way to the raised platform where the band played. At his nod, they finished their song, and a man introduced as the town council chairman invited Gabriel to address the gathering. "Thank you, Bill." Gabriel's voice resonated with a depth that commanded attention without seeming to try. "Ravenwood has celebrated the harvest for over 200 years, through wars and hardships. It speaks to the resilience of this community." He paused, scanning the crowd, and Ellie felt a prickle along her spine when his gaze passed over her. "However, I must address a serious concern. There have been reports of trespassing and poaching in the surrounding forests. Some incidents have turned dangerous." His jaw tightened visibly.
Until the situation is resolved, I'm implementing a sunset curfew for everyone's safety. The forest trails and backcountry roads will be patrolled. Anyone found outside after dark without authorization will be escorted home, the first time. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A curfew seemed extreme for a small town where many made their living from the wilderness. Additionally, my security team will be conducting regular sweeps through town. Do not interfere with them. They're here for your protection. As he finished speaking, his eyes locked with Ellie's across the square. Time seemed to suspend, the noise of the festival receding to a distant hum. Recognition flashed in his gaze, though they had never met, followed by something else. Surprise, then an intensity that made her breath catch. The moment broke when Gabriel looked away, stepping down from the platform as the band resumed playing, this time a Creedence Clearwater Revival tune that seemed jarringly upbeat after his somber announcement. "Well, that was cheerful," Sarah remarked, "though he's not wrong about the dangers. Strange incidents lately. Livestock killed, hikers going missing briefly and returning with no memory of where they'd been." Ellie's hand drifted to her medallion, a habitual gesture of comfort. Who exactly is he, beyond being the town's benefactor? Sarah hesitated, glancing around before leaning closer. Ex-military, special forces, or something classified. Came back about 10 years ago when his father died. Before that, he'd only visit occasionally. She lowered her voice further. Some say the Thornwoods are the reason Ravenwood has never had the troubles that plagued other mountain towns. No major crime, no unexplained disappearances until recently. "What kind of stories?" Ellie asked, curiosity piqued. "The kind my grandmother told around the fire when the moon was full," Sarah replied with a self-conscious smile. "About men who could command the beasts of the forest, who patrolled the boundaries between the wild and the tame." Before Ellie could press for details, they were interrupted by Sarah's friends. The conversation turned to local gossip, but Ellie found her attention repeatedly drawn to Gabriel, who now stood with a group of men sharing his alert posture and watchful gaze. As the evening progressed and temperature dropped, Ellie made her excuses. The festival would continue until midnight, but fatigue weighed on her after a day cataloging her aunt's extensive collection. The streets of Ravenwood were quiet, most residents still at the festival. Street lamps cast pools of amber light at regular intervals, but between them, the darkness seemed unusually thick. Ellie quickened her pace, the journal she'd found in her aunt's attic suddenly feeling heavy in her messenger bag. The first howl came as she rounded the corner onto Maple Street, where her bookshop stood. It rose from the direction of the forest that bordered the town to the north, a sound too deep, too resonant to belong to any ordinary wolf. A second howl answered from the east, then another from the west, creating a triangulation that seemed centered on her position. Ellie froze, her hand instinctively reaching for her medallion. A primitive part of her brain screamed danger, urging her to run, but she remained motionless, listening as the howls faded into silence. The sound of footsteps broke the spell. Gabriel Thornwood emerged from the shadows between two buildings, his expression grim. "Ms. Hayes," he said, no surprise in his voice, "you shouldn't be out alone." "The bookstore is just there," Ellie replied, gesturing to the building less than 50 yards away. "And I don't recall agreeing to your curfew, Mr. Thornwood." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "It's not a request. Those woods aren't safe, especially not for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Ellie's academic curiosity momentarily overrode her unease. "Have we met before? You seem to know who I am." "Everyone knows you're Helena Morgan Hayes's niece," he said, moving closer. In the streetlight, his eyes appeared almost amber. "The new owner of the oldest bookstore in Ravenwood." Ellie noted his use of her aunt's full name, including her maiden name, Morgan, a detail most townsfolk wouldn't know or mention. "And that makes me of particular interest because—" Gabriel's attention shifted to her medallion, now visible as her scarf had slipped. Something flickered in his expression, recognition, and perhaps concern. "Where did you get that?" His voice dropped, almost to a growl. "It was my grandmother's," Ellie answered, suddenly reluctant to share more. "Mr. Thornwood, I appreciate your concern for public safety, but I'm perfectly capable of walking the last 50 yards to my own home." Before Gabriel could respond, a crash sounded from the alley behind them. He moved with startling speed, positioning himself between Ellie and the potential threat. "Get behind me," he ordered, his posture shifting subtly into a combat stance. From the darkness emerged a figure that defied immediate categorization. It moved on all fours, yet its body structure wasn't fully animal. In the dim light, Ellie could make out coarse gray fur covering powerful limbs, a broad chest, and a head that seemed caught between human and lupine features. Most disturbing were its eyes, glowing red orbs fixed on her with unmistakable malice. "Run!" Gabriel commanded, his voice low and tense. "To your shop. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." Ellie backed away, unable to tear her gaze from the creature that now rose to its full height, easily 7 feet tall, with clawed hands that looked capable of rending steel. Gabriel reached into his jacket and withdrew a pistol that gleamed silver in the streetlight. "Now, Eleanor!" The use of her full name jolted her into action. Ellie turned and sprinted toward the bookstore, fumbling in her bag for the keys as she ran. Behind her came a roar, partly animal, partly something else, followed by the sharp report of Gabriel's weapon. She reached the door, hands shaking as she jammed the key into the lock. As the door swung open, she glanced back to see Gabriel engaged in combat with the creature. His movements were a blur, displaying a speed and strength that seemed beyond human capability. The creature slashed at him with massive claws, missing by mere inches as Gabriel ducked and fired again, the shot striking the beast's shoulder. The creature howled in pain and fury, the sound sending ice through Ellie's veins. She stepped into the shop, prepared to close and lock the door, when a second howl answered from much closer, inside the bookstore. Ellie froze, the hair on her neck rising. Slowly, she turned to face the interior of the shop. In the darkness, a pair of red eyes gleamed between the stacks of ancient books. The creature moved forward, moonlight from the windows revealing its massive form as it stalked toward her with predatory intent. Her mind raced through options: run back outside toward Gabriel and the first creature, try to reach the shotgun her aunt had kept behind the counter, or make for the hidden staircase that led to the apartment above. None seemed likely to succeed against the speed and strength she had witnessed. As the creature closed the distance, Ellie's hand closed around her medallion. A strange calm washed over her, and words she didn't recognize rose to her lips. An incantation in a language she had never studied yet somehow knew. The medallion grew warm, then hot against her skin, beginning to emit a soft blue light that grew in intensity as the creature lunged. A barrier of shimmering energy formed between them, stopping the beast mid-leap. It howled in frustration, clawing at the invisible shield that protected her. The front door burst open, and Gabriel entered, his shirt torn and bloody from his own encounter. He took in the scene with a quick glance, Ellie, the protective barrier, the enraged creature, and raised his weapon. "Close your eyes, Ellie," he ordered. She obeyed instinctively, still maintaining the barrier through sheer force of will. The gunshot was deafening in the confined space, followed by a thud and a whimper. When she opened her eyes, the creature lay on the floor, its form already beginning to shift, fur receding to reveal human skin, claws retracting into ordinary fingers. Within moments, a naked man lay where the beast had been, a bullet wound in his chest, seeping dark blood onto the hardwood floor. His eyes, now a normal brown, stared sightlessly at the ceiling. Gabriel knelt beside the body, checking for a pulse he clearly didn't expect to find. His expression was grim but unsurprised, as if this were a scenario he had encountered before. "What?" Ellie began, her voice faltering. "What was that?" Gabriel stood, tucking his weapon back into his jacket. His amber eyes studied her face, assessing. "I think you already know. Part of you has always known." Ellie's mind raced, connecting fragments that had never made sense in isolation. Her grandmother's strange warnings, her parents' insistence on moving far from Ravenwood, her aunt's extensive collection of books on folklore and mythology that had always seemed oddly specific. "Werewolf," she whispered, the word feeling simultaneously absurd and absolutely correct. Gabriel nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Lycanthrope is the term we prefer. Or shifter." We, Ellie repeated, the implications settling like lead in her stomach. Instead of answering directly, Gabriel approached her, his movements careful, as if she were a spooked animal. Your barrier is fading. Ellie looked down to see the blue light receding into the medallion, the energy field that had protected her dissipating like morning mist. How did you do that? Gabriel asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I don't know. It just happened. The words came to me. Gabriel's gaze returned to the medallion. May I? After a moment's hesitation, Ellie nodded. His fingers brushed her collarbone as he lifted the medallion, careful not to remove it from around her neck. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her, like static electricity but deeper, reaching into some core part of her being. By Gabriel's sharp intake of breath, he had felt it too. The seal of the Guardians, he said, his voice low with something like reverence. I thought the last one was destroyed decades ago. It was my grandmother's, Ellie repeated. Eleanor Morgan. I was named for her. Gabriel released the medallion, stepping back. And you had no idea what it was? What it meant? Until 5 minutes ago, I thought werewolves were the stuff of bad horror movies, Ellie replied, finding refuge in sarcasm as the reality of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. So, no, I had no idea I was carrying around a magical artifact. A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. We need to move. That wasn't a random attack. They were hunting you specifically. They? There are more like... She gestured to the body on the floor. Stone Claw Pack, Gabriel confirmed. They've been encroaching on our territory for weeks, but this is the first direct attack in town. He moved to the windows, scanning the street outside. They'll have others nearby. We need to get you somewhere secure. I'm not leaving, Ellie stated firmly. This is my home now. If someone wants to drive me out, they'll have to do better than sending... She faltered, still struggling to accept what she had seen. They weren't trying to drive you out, Eleanor. Gabriel's expression darkened. They were trying to kill you, and they'll keep trying until they succeed or are stopped. A movement outside the window caught his attention. We don't have time for a full explanation right now. Is there a back exit? Ellie nodded, her practical nature reasserting itself in the face of immediate danger. Through the stockroom. It leads to an alley. Good. Get whatever you need. 5 minutes. As Ellie turned toward the stairs to gather some essentials, her foot struck a loose floorboard near the oldest section of bookshelves. The hollow sound gave her pause. Kneeling, she pressed on the board, feeling it give slightly. On impulse, she slid her fingers along its edge and pulled. The board came away easily, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a wooden box, its surface carved with the same symbols as her medallion. With trembling fingers, she lifted it out. The box opened smoothly, as if it had been recently oiled despite its apparent age. Nestled within were several items. A leather-bound book much older than the journal she had found in the attic, a silver dagger with intricate engravings on the blade, and a small vial containing what appeared to be dried herbs or roots. Gabriel appeared at her side, eyeing the contents with obvious recognition. Your aunt was more prepared than I realized. Helena was the last keeper of records I knew of. Keeper of records? Ellie echoed, carefully lifting the book from its resting place. The historians who maintained the knowledge of both worlds, human and lycanthrope, Gabriel explained, his tone suggesting he was sharing only the barest outline of a much larger story. They preserved the old ways, the treaties, the bloodlines. Your aunt was the last one officially recognized by all the major packs. Ellie thought of the quiet, gentle woman who had filled her childhood visits with stories and sweets, who had maintained this shop with meticulous care while apparently guarding secrets that spanned centuries. She never said a word. She was protecting you, Gabriel replied, as was your grandmother, as your parents tried to do by moving away. He glanced toward the windows again. We need to go. Bring the box. Ellie placed the book back inside, closed the lid, and tucked the box into her messenger bag alongside the journal. A strange sense of inevitability settled over her, as if she were stepping onto a path that had been waiting for her all along. They moved quickly through the stockroom and out into the alley. Gabriel led the way to a black SUV parked half a block down, its exterior unmarked, but its construction suggesting military-grade specifications. As they approached, Ellie heard another howl from the direction of the forest, closer than before. Gabriel opened the passenger door for her. "Thornwood Estate is the safest place for you now. It was built to withstand attacks from both human and non-human threats." As Ellie settled into the seat, Gabriel closed the door and rounded the vehicle with preternatural speed. Once behind the wheel, he started the engine and pulled away from the curb with controlled urgency. "I have questions," Ellie said as they drove through the darkened streets of Ravenwood. "Many, many questions." "I'd be concerned if you didn't," Gabriel replied, his attention on the road and the mirrors, constantly scanning for threats. "And I'll answer what I can. But first, I need to know, what exactly did Helena tell you about your family history, about the Morgans?" "Almost nothing," Ellie admitted. "My parents changed our name back to Hayes when I was young, my father's name. They never spoke about the Morgan side except to say my grandmother was eccentric. When she died, they seemed more relieved than grieved." Gabriel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "They were afraid, with good reason." He glanced at her. "The Morgans were guardians, humans with the ability to bridge the gap between our world and yours, to maintain the balance between natural and supernatural. They possessed abilities that made them both invaluable and targets." The SUV turned onto a narrow road that wound upward into the forested hills overlooking Ravenwood. Ahead, Ellie could see the silhouette of a massive structure against the night sky. Thornwood Estate, a fortress disguised as a mansion, its stone walls and watchtowers remnants of a more turbulent era. "And you believe I have these abilities?" Ellie asked, thinking of the barrier she had somehow created. "I don't believe. I know." Gabriel's amber eyes reflected the dashboard lights, giving them an unearthly glow. "What you did back there, creating a barrier strong enough to hold off a fully transformed Stoneclaw warrior, that's not something just anyone can do, even with the seal. The medallion focuses power. It doesn't create it." They passed through an ornate iron gate that swung open automatically at their approach. The driveway curved through manicured grounds before ending in a circular courtyard before the main entrance of the estate. "Welcome to Thornwood," Gabriel said as he parked. "Ancestral home of the Shadow Pack, and for now, your sanctuary." As Ellie stepped out of the vehicle, the enormity of the day's revelations threatened to overwhelm her. Her life as she had known it, the rational academic world of archaeology and ancient texts, had been upended in the space of an hour. Yet beneath the shock and confusion, a strange sense of rightness persisted, as if some part of her had always been waiting for this moment. Gabriel came to stand beside her, his tall figure silhouetted against the lights of the mansion. "There's something else you should know before we go in," he said, his deep voice carrying in the still night air. "The attack tonight wasn't random or opportunistic. The Stoneclaw have allied with another pack, the Grey Wolves. They've been searching for something, or someone, for decades." "Me?" Ellie asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Not you specifically. The last guardian, the last true Morgan." Gabriel turned to face her fully. "There was a purge 50 years ago, during what we call the Night of Red Moons. Most of the Guardian bloodlines were wiped out. The few survivors went into hiding, changing names, separating from one another for safety." "Why?" Ellie struggled to process the implications. "Why target people who maintained balance?" "Because balance limits power," Gabriel replied simply. "And some believe that in this world predators should rule, not coexist." A howl rose from the forest surrounding the estate. Not threatening, but a signal, echoed by others in a complex pattern. Gabriel listened, his head tilted slightly, before nodding in apparent satisfaction. "My sentries report no immediate threats," he explained, seeing Ellie's questioning look. "But we should go inside. The night is far from over, and you have much to learn about your inheritance." As they approached the massive oak doors of Thornwood Estate, they swung open to reveal a grand entrance hall illuminated by chandeliers and a roaring fireplace. Several people waited inside, men and women with the same alert posture and watchful eyes that Gabriel possessed. Ellie took a deep breath and stepped across the threshold, leaving behind the life she had known and entering a world of ancient secrets, primal powers, and dangers she was only beginning to comprehend. The weight of the wooden box in her bag seemed to increase with each step, a tangible reminder of the legacy she had unknowingly carried all her life. The doors closed behind them with a resonant thud that echoed through the hall like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. In the depths of the mansion, something stirred, a collective awareness of change, of possibilities reawakened after decades of dormancy. "The Guardian has returned," someone whispered, the words rippling through the gathered members of the Shadow Pack. Gabriel's hand settled briefly on Ellie's shoulder, a gesture both protective and affirming. "Not returned," he corrected, his amber eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Awakened." The great hall of Thornwood Estate breathed with history. Massive timber beams, darkened by centuries of hearth smoke, spanned the vaulted ceiling high above. Medieval weapons and family crests decorated walls of dressed stone, interspersed with more modern military memorabilia, medals, photographs, and citations spanning conflicts from the Civil War to Afghanistan. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, large enough for a man to stand inside, its hearth alive with dancing flames that cast the entire space in warm, flickering light. Ellie felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. The members of the Shadow Pack, at least 20 of them gathered in the hall, studied her with expressions ranging from open curiosity to guarded suspicion. They stood in loose formation, unconsciously arranged in what she recognized as a hierarchy, with the most dominant figures positioned closest to Gabriel. "This is Eleanor Hayes," Gabriel announced, his resonant voice filling the space. "Granddaughter of Eleanor Morgan, great-niece of Helena Morgan Hayes. She bears the seal of the Guardians." A murmur rippled through the assembly. One man stepped forward, his resemblance to Gabriel unmistakable, despite his lighter coloring and more open countenance. Where Gabriel's presence commanded respect through intensity, this man carried himself with an easy confidence that suggested he had nothing to prove. "Marcus Thornwood," he introduced himself with a slight nod, "Beta of the Shadow Pack, and unfortunately, this Grouch's younger brother." He gestured toward Gabriel, who responded with a look that might have been annoyance from anyone else. "Don't let the friendly act fool you," Gabriel said dryly. "He was Special Forces too. Just because he smiles while he takes you apart doesn't make it hurt any less." Marcus grinned, revealing perfect teeth with slightly elongated canines. "I save the serious face for serious threats. Speaking of which," he turned to Gabriel, "Ian reports Stoneclaw activity along the eastern boundary. At least 5, maybe more." Gabriel nodded, his expression hardening. "Double the patrols." "No one goes out alone, and Marcus—" "I know," Marcus interrupted. "Our guest needs the full briefing. Follow me, Ms. Hayes. I promise I'm much better company than my brother." Ellie glanced at Gabriel, who gave a slight nod. "I need to coordinate our defenses. Marcus will explain what you need to know for now. We'll speak again before moonrise." As Gabriel issued orders to the gathered pack members, Marcus led Ellie deeper into the mansion. They passed through corridors lined with portraits, stern-faced men and women who shared the same commanding presence as the Thornwood brothers. "Family resemblance is strong," Ellie observed, studying a painting from what appeared to be the Civil War era, a Union officer with Gabriel's jawline and intense gaze. "Alpha traits tend to be dominant," Marcus replied. "In more ways than one. That's Jeremiah Thornwood. He helped organize the Underground Railroad through these mountains. The estate has tunnels that lead all the way to the next county." They entered a room that stood in stark contrast to the historical grandeur of the main hall. A modern command center hummed with technology, multiple screens displaying thermal imaging of the surrounding forest, topographical maps with moving indicators, and surveillance feeds from around the estate and town. "Welcome to the war room," Marcus said, gesturing to the impressive setup. "We may honor tradition, but we're not stupid enough to fight modern threats with antique weapons." A woman monitoring one of the stations looked up at their entrance.
She was striking, with copper hair pulled back in a severe braid and green eyes that assessed Ellie with clinical precision. Though she wore simple civilian clothes, jeans and a forest green sweater, her bearing suggested military training. Dr. Reed, Marcus introduced her. Vivian heads our medical division and serves as one of our senior betas. She's also the reason half of us are still alive, including Gabriel. Vivian rose, extending a hand to Ellie. Her grip was firm, professional. Ms. Hayes, I've been reading Helena's records on the Morgan lineage. Your family has a remarkable history. A history I know almost nothing about, Ellie admitted. Which is why you're here, Vivian said, gesturing to a conference table in the center of the room. Please, sit. As they settled around the table, Marcus retrieved a bottle of amber liquid and 3 glasses from a cabinet. Thornwood Reserve, he explained, pouring generous measures. Distilled on the property since 1795. Some conversations require lubrication, and this one definitely qualifies. The bourbon burned pleasantly as it went down, warming Ellie from within. She placed the wooden box from her shop on the table, alongside her aunt's journal. I think I'm entitled to know why creatures that shouldn't exist are trying to kill me, and why everyone here seems to know more about my family than I do. Marcus exchanged a glance with Vivian before responding. Fair enough. The simple version? You're the last known descendant of the oldest guardian bloodline in North America. The Morgans have been maintaining the balance between humans and supernatural entities since before the Revolution. Guardians, Ellie repeated. Gabriel used that term too. What exactly does it mean? Vivian pulled up an image on a nearby screen, an ancient woodcut depicting a woman standing between a village and a pack of wolves, her hands raised, a familiar amulet visible around her neck. Throughout history, certain humans developed abilities that allowed them to interact with the supernatural world without being consumed by it, she explained. They could perceive what others couldn't, channel energies that others couldn't access, and most importantly, they could mediate between species. The first documented Morgan in America was Elizabeth, who arrived in 1692. Salem, Ellie murmured, making the historical connection. The witch trials. Marcus nodded approvingly. She wasn't fleeing persecution, she was heading toward it. The trials weren't just superstition run amok. Some real practitioners were using dark magic, drawing power from fear and suffering. Elizabeth helped separate the innocent from the guilty. With the help of the Thornwood Pack, Vivian added. Our families have been allied for over 3 centuries. The Thornwoods protected the physical, the Morgans maintained the metaphysical balance. Ellie took another sip of bourbon, finding its warmth steadying as her worldview continued to shift. And my grandmother? My parents? Where do they fit in this history? Marcus's expression sobered. The Night of Red Moons. August 1973. Multiple packs that believed in supremacy, the idea that shifters should rule over humans, coordinated attacks on guardian families across the country. Your grandparents were targeted. Your grandfather was killed. Eleanor, your grandmother, escaped with your mother, who was just a child then. My mother never mentioned any of this, Ellie said quietly. She was 7 years old when she watched her father die, Vivian replied, her tone gentler. Helena's records suggest your mother rejected her heritage entirely, wanted nothing to do with any of it. She married, took her husband's name, and raised you as far from this world as she could. The revelation settled heavily on Ellie's shoulders. She thought of her mother, practical, rational, always slightly anxious, and tried to reconcile that image with a traumatized child fleeing supernatural assassins. And the attacks now? Why after all this time? Marcus leaned forward, his casual demeanor giving way to something more focused. Because of what you're carrying. That medallion, the seal of the Guardians, was thought destroyed in the Purge. It's not just a symbol, it's a tool, a focus for Guardian abilities. Some believe it can be used to permanently shift the balance of power between our worlds. I still don't understand why these Stoneclaw people would care about balance, Ellie pressed. Because balance limits their power, Vivian explained. Think of it like an ecosystem. Natural predators are kept in check by various factors. Remove those factors, and the predators overrun everything, Ellie finished, following the logic. Exactly. The Gray Pack is even more dangerous, Marcus continued. They're led by Victor Gray, ex-CIA. During the Cold War, the government experimented with using shifters as operatives. Victor was their star pupil. When the program was shut down, he disappeared with research that should have been destroyed. Before Ellie could ask what kind of research, the door opened. Gabriel entered, his presence immediately commanding the room's attention. He'd changed into tactical gear, black utility pants, a fitted shirt that revealed the powerful musculature beneath, and a weapons harness holding a sidearm and what appeared to be silver daggers. Stoneclaw scouts have been neutralized, he reported, his gaze falling on the wooden box. You opened it. Ellie nodded. It seemed relevant to the conversation. A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips. Helena taught you well, even if you didn't realize it. He approached the table, examining the box's contents. The Book of Bindings. I haven't seen this in decades. Helena was its keeper after your grandmother fled. What is it? Ellie asked, studying the ancient tome. A record of treaties, pacts, and bloodlines, Gabriel replied, including the original covenant between the Morgans and the Thornwoods. He carefully opened the book, turning to a page marked with a silver ribbon. Here. Ellie leaned forward, examining the elegantly penned document. It detailed an agreement between Elizabeth Morgan and Jeremiah Thornwood, dated 1712. The terms outlined mutual protection and support, with specific duties assigned to each family: the Thornwoods to provide physical protection, the Morgans to maintain metaphysical boundaries. At the bottom of the page were signatures in what appeared to be blood, accompanied by symbols matching those on her medallion. A blood oath, Ellie murmured. The strongest kind, Gabriel confirmed, binding not just those who made it, but their descendants. The magic in your bloodline comes from this pact, strengthened through generations of service. Ellie traced a finger over her family name, feeling a strange connection to this ancestor she'd never known. And this is why they're hunting me? Because of a 300-year-old pact? Partly, Gabriel said, but there's something else. He exchanged a significant look with Marcus, who nodded and accessed a file on one of the computer terminals. A series of images appeared on the main screen, satellite photos showing a compound hidden deep in the mountains, surrounded by security measures. This is the Gray Pack's main base, about 50 miles from here, in the most remote part of the range. Our scouts reported increased activity in the last month, including shipments of specialized equipment. What kind of equipment? Ellie asked. Laboratory supplies, Vivian answered. Victor Gray has been continuing the research he stole, experiments on controlling the shift, on weaponizing lycanthropy. Gabriel's expression darkened. We believe he's developed a method to override a shifter's free will, essentially creating berserkers he can control. The red eyes you saw on your attacker, not natural, sign of chemical manipulation. It's not just mind control, Vivian added, pulling up molecular diagrams on another screen. He's found a way to alter shifter DNA at the cellular level, creating a permanent chemical dependency that he can activate or suppress remotely. And this technology, this red protocol as Gray calls it, is particularly effective against those with guardian blood, Marcus said, his normally easy manner completely gone. That's what makes you so valuable to him. Your blood could be the key to perfecting his formula. Ellie felt a chill run through her body, despite the warmth of the bourbon. So I'm what? A potential lab rat? You're far more than that, Gabriel said firmly. You're the last of a bloodline that has protected the boundaries between worlds for centuries. Without guardians like your grandmother, the metaphysical borders grow thin, allowing incursions. Incursions? Ellie questioned. From what exactly? Gabriel hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Come with me. There's something you need to see. He led Ellie, followed by Marcus and Vivian, deeper into the mansion. They descended several flights of stairs, passing through security checkpoints that required Gabriel's biometric identification. Finally, they reached a heavily reinforced door with ancient symbols carved into its frame, symbols matching those on Ellie's medallion.
Gabriel placed his palm against the center of the door, then looked at Ellie. "Your medallion. Press it against the marking here." He indicated a circular depression in the door's surface. Ellie removed the medallion from around her neck and placed it against the indicated spot. Immediately, the symbols on the door began to glow with the same soft blue light that had emanated from the medallion during her encounter with the creature. The door swung open silently, revealing a circular chamber whose walls were covered in what appeared to be star charts and maps, but with configurations Ellie had never seen in any astronomical guide. At the chamber's center stood a pedestal supporting a slowly rotating sphere composed of what looked like liquid silver. "The Revealer," Gabriel said quietly. "One of the oldest artifacts in our possession. It shows the true state of the boundaries." Ellie approached the sphere, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. As she neared it, the liquid silver surface rippled, then cleared like a mirror. Within its depths, she saw landscapes that were almost recognizable but fundamentally wrong. Forests where the trees grew downward from the sky, mountains that flowed like water, creatures with anatomies that defied earthly biology. "Other realms," Marcus explained. "Dimensions that exist alongside our own, separated by boundaries that guardians help maintain. Some benign, others not so much." The sphere's surface shifted again, showing what appeared to be tiers in reality itself, places where the boundaries had grown dangerously thin. Ellie noticed that many of these weak points corresponded to locations on Earth, including one alarmingly close to Ravenwood. "The boundaries are weakening," she whispered, somehow knowing this was true. "Have been for decades." "Since the Purge," Gabriel confirmed. "Without enough guardians to maintain them, the natural deterioration has accelerated, and now Grey is actively working to exploit these weaknesses." "For what purpose?" Ellie asked, though a part of her feared she already knew the answer. "Power," Vivian stated simply. "Energies from other realms that could be harnessed, entities that could be controlled or bargained with. At least, that's what Grey believes." "The truth is far more dangerous," Gabriel said, his voice grim. "Grey doesn't understand what he's tampering with. The entities beyond those boundaries aren't potential allies or resources to be exploited. They're predators that see our world as hunting grounds." The sphere's surface churned, revealing glimpses of shapes that defied description, forms that seemed to shift between states of matter, entities composed of angles that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Just looking at them made Ellie's head ache and her stomach turn. "That's enough," Gabriel said, noticing her discomfort. He passed his hand over the sphere, and its surface returned to opaque silver. "You see now what's at stake. Not just the safety of shifters and humans, but the integrity of our reality itself." "And I'm somehow supposed to help prevent this?" Ellie asked, her voice smaller than she intended. The weight of expectation pressed down on her with almost physical force. "I don't even know what I am, let alone how to use whatever abilities I might have." "You're not alone in this," Marcus said, his usual warmth returning to his voice. "The alliance between Thornwood and Morgan has endured for centuries for good reason. We are stronger together than apart." Before Ellie could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red lights flashed along the corridor outside the chamber, and a computerized voice announced, "Perimeter breach. Sectors 3 and 7, multiple hostiles detected." Gabriel was instantly in motion, his body language shifting to combat readiness. "Marcus, secure the armory. Vivian, prepare the medical bay for potential casualties." He turned to Ellie. "Stay with me." They hurried back up through the mansion, the sounds of organized chaos echoing through the corridors as pack members moved to defensive positions. In the war room, screens displayed thermal signatures approaching from the eastern forest, at least a dozen figures moving with coordinated precision toward the estate. "Stoneclaw?" Ellie asked. "Stoneclaw muscle, Grey Pack tactics," Gabriel replied, studying the surveillance feeds. "They've never been this bold before. Something's changed." A young pack member with tousled dark hair burst into the room. "Alpha, Eastern Perimeter is holding, but they've deployed some kind of sonic weapon. Jensen and Rodriguez can't maintain form. They're stuck mid-shift." Gabriel's expression darkened. Gray's technology, designed to disrupt the shift process. He turned to a weapons locker, retrieving what appeared to be modified assault rifles. We need to take out that sonic emitter before it affects more of our defenders. What about me? Ellie asked, feeling both vulnerable and frustrated by her lack of useful skills in this situation. Gabriel paused, studying her with those intense eyes. Your medallion might protect you from the sonic disruption. And if we encounter any fully controlled subjects, your barrier could be our best defense. A distant explosion rocked the mansion, dust sifting down from the ceiling. They're using heavy ordnance, the young pack member reported. Military grade.
Not Stoneclaw's style, Gabriel muttered. This has Gray's fingerprints all over it. He handed Ellie a tactical vest. Put this on. Stay behind me at all times. They moved through the mansion toward the eastern section, passing pack members in various states of preparation. Some fully human with conventional weapons, others partially shifted with claws and enhanced musculature, still others fully transformed into massive wolves that made the creatures from horror films look like puppies in comparison. As they reached the eastern wing, the sounds of combat intensified. Gunfire, explosions, and the unmistakable howls of wolves engaged in battle. Through windows shattered by the fighting, Ellie could see figures moving across the estate grounds, human mercenaries in tactical gear supporting what appeared to be Stoneclaw shifters in various stages of transformation. But what drew her attention most were the figures with glowing red eyes, 4 of them, moving with unnatural synchronicity, each carrying what looked like high-tech sound cannons. Unlike the other attackers, these moved without taking cover, without showing any concern for personal safety. The Red Protocol subjects, Gabriel identified them grimly. No free will, no self-preservation instinct, just weapons aimed at a target. As they watched, one of the Red Protocol subjects turned its sound cannon toward a group of Shadow Pack defenders. The weapon discharged a pulse of distorted air that made Ellie's teeth ache even at this distance. The defending shifters dropped to their knees, their bodies caught in painful partial transformations as the sonic disruption interfered with their ability to control the shift. We need to take out those sound cannons, Gabriel decided. Without them, we can push back the conventional forces. Before they could move, a massive explosion blew in part of the eastern wall. Debris scattered across the corridor, and through the newly created breach poured mercenaries in gray pack insignia, weapons at the ready. Gabriel reacted instantly, pushing Ellie behind a stone column as he returned fire with preternatural accuracy. 3 attackers fell before the rest could find cover. "Your barrier," Gabriel called to her over the sound of gunfire. "Can you create it again?" Ellie clutched her medallion, trying to recall the sensation that had triggered the protective shield in the bookstore. It had come instinctively then, words rising unbidden to her lips. But now, with gunfire and explosions rattling her concentration, the connection felt tenuous. "I don't know how," she admitted. "It just happened before." "Try," Gabriel urged, ducking out from cover to fire another burst at the attackers. "Focus on protection, on creating a boundary." Ellie closed her eyes, concentrating on the medallion warming in her palm. The word boundary sparked something in her mind, a connection to the ancient knowledge contained within the Morgan bloodline. Boundary, border, threshold. Terms that carried power beyond their ordinary meaning. Words began to form in her consciousness, the same ancient language that had come to her in the bookstore. She spoke them aloud, feeling the medallion grow hot against her skin. The blue light returned, spreading outward from the medallion in concentric waves. It formed a shimmering dome around her and Gabriel, just as the attackers launched another coordinated assault. Bullets struck the barrier and slowed to a stop, hanging suspended in the air before dropping harmlessly to the floor. Gabriel looked at the barrier in amazement, then at Ellie with newfound respect. "Can you move with it? Extend it to cover our advance?" Ellie nodded, finding that maintaining the barrier required less effort than creating it. "I think so." "Then let's move. We need to reach the main hall. That's where Marcus is coordinating our counterattack." They advanced through the embattled mansion, the shimmering barrier deflecting both conventional projectiles and the sonic pulses from the Red Protocol weapons. As they moved,
Ellie found herself growing more attuned to the energies flowing through the medallion and her own blood. Each time the barrier repelled an attack, she felt the impact not as physical force, but as a ripple in an energy field that was becoming increasingly familiar. They reached the main hall to find it transformed into a command center for the defense. Marcus stood at the central table, directing pack members with the efficiency of a seasoned military officer. He looked up as they entered, relief washing over his features.
"The barrier worked," he observed, "just like Grandmother Eleanor's."
"It's holding for now," Ellie replied, aware of a growing fatigue as the barrier continued to draw on her energy. "But I don't know how long I can maintain it."
"You don't need to anymore," Marcus assured her. "We've secured the inner perimeter. The sonic weapons were their main advantage, and your barrier has effectively neutralized that."
As if to confirm his words, a series of explosions sounded from the eastern grounds, followed by triumphant howls from Shadow Pack members.
"Sound cannons destroyed," reported a defender, entering the hall with a bleeding gash across his forehead. "Stoneclaw forces are retreating back to the tree line."
Gabriel nodded in satisfaction, though his expression remained vigilant.
"They'll regroup.
This was a probing attack, testing our defenses and capabilities." His gaze fell on Ellie.
"And confirming your presence."
The realization sent a chill through her.
"They know I'm here." "They suspected," Gabriel corrected. "Now they know for certain, and they've seen what you can do with the medallion." "Which means Gray will accelerate his timeline," Marcus added grimly. "He knows a guardian has awakened, even if only partially."
Ellie allowed the barrier to dissipate, the blue light retracting into the medallion as she released the energy. Immediately, exhaustion washed over her, making her legs unsteady. Gabriel caught her arm, supporting her with his strength. "Using the medallion takes a toll," he explained, "especially without proper training. You need rest."
"What I need are answers," Ellie countered, though she didn't pull away from his support. "Full answers, not just fragments. If I'm going to be hunted for what I am, I deserve to know exactly what that means."
Gabriel and Marcus exchanged looks, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Gabriel nodded.
"You're right. It's time for the full truth, including what we suspect about your grandmother's final plan."
"My grandmother's plan?" Ellie echoed.
"She didn't just give you that medallion for protection," Marcus said. "She was ensuring the survival of the Guardian lineage, setting pieces in motion that would culminate years later, now when the boundaries are at their weakest and the need most dire."
"What are you saying?"
Ellie asked, though a part of her already suspected the answer. "That your return to Ravenwood wasn't coincidence," Gabriel replied. "That Helena's bequest of the bookstore, the hidden artifacts, your discovery of the medallion's power, all of it was orchestrated decades ago by a guardian who saw further than most."
The thought was simultaneously comforting and disturbing, that her life's path had been influenced from beyond the grave, that choices she thought were her own might have been subtly guided by forces she was only now beginning to comprehend. "If that's true," she said slowly, "then what happens next? What was the next step in my grandmother's plan?"
"For that," Gabriel replied, "we need to consult someone who knew Eleanor Morgan better than anyone still living, someone who has walked between worlds for longer than any of us have been alive."
"Who?" Ellie asked.
"Lyra Blackfeather," Marcus answered. "The last shapeshifter of the Cherokee Nation, guardian of Sacred Falls, and your grandmother's closest ally in the final days before the Purge."
"And where do we find this Lyra Blackfeather?" Ellie questioned.
Gabriel's expression grew solemn. "That's the problem. Sacred Falls lies deep in Greypack territory, in the most remote part of the mountains. Reaching her means crossing through lands now controlled by our enemies."
"Then why go at all?" Ellie asked, practical concerns asserting themselves.
"If it's so dangerous?" "Because Sacred Falls is more than just Lyra's home," Gabriel explained. "It's a place of power, where the boundaries between worlds are naturally thin. It's where guardians have traditionally completed their awakening for centuries, accessing the full spectrum of their abilities." "And if Gray's accelerating his timeline," Marcus added, "then we need a fully awakened guardian, not just someone with instinctive access to partial abilities."
Ellie looked between them,
the weight of expectation heavy on her shoulders. Everything was happening so quickly. Just yesterday, she had been an ordinary archaeologist running a bookshop, and now she was being told her destiny was to become some kind of supernatural border patrol agent with mystical powers she barely understood. "You're asking a lot," she said finally. "To trust people I just met, to believe in abilities I didn't know I had, to walk into enemy territory on the word of a grandmother I barely remember." "We're not asking," Gabriel said quietly. "We're offering."
The choice has always been yours, Eleanor. Your grandmother knew that. The Morgan blood carries power, but it also carries free will. You can walk away from all of this. "And if I do?" Ellie challenged. "What happens to the boundaries, to Ravenwood, to the world?" Gabriel met her gaze steadily. Without a guardian, the boundaries continue to weaken. Gray continues his experiments. Eventually, something breaks through from the other side, something that shouldn't exist in our reality. What happens after that? There are no historical precedents, because guardians have always prevented it from happening before. The responsibility was enormous, nearly crushing in its magnitude. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, Ellie felt something else stirring. A sense of purpose she had never experienced in her academic career, a connection to something larger than herself that resonated with some deep, previously unknown part of her being. "I need time," she said finally, "to think, to process all of this." "Of course," Gabriel agreed. "Rest tonight. We'll make preparations for the journey to Sacred Falls, but nothing happens without your consent." As if on cue, Vivian appeared at the entrance to the hall. "Your room is prepared, Ms. Hayes. I've taken the liberty of having some clothes and necessities brought from town." She held up a familiar messenger bag. "And your personal items from the bookstore have been secured." Ellie nodded gratefully, the events of the day catching up with her in a wave of physical and emotional exhaustion. "Thank you." As Vivian led her from the hall, Ellie glanced back to see Gabriel and Marcus already deep in strategic discussion, planning defenses and contingencies with the efficiency of men accustomed to crisis. The weight of their centuries-old responsibility was visible in their bearing, in the focused intensity of their efforts. The guest room Vivian showed her to was comfortable without being opulent. A 4-poster bed with crisp linens, a fireplace with a small fire already burning, and windows that looked out over the forested mountains, now peaceful under the night sky. "There's a bathroom through that door," Vivian indicated. "Clean clothes in the wardrobe. I've left some mild sedatives on the bedside table if you need help sleeping after everything." "Thank you," Ellie said again, genuinely appreciative of the practical considerations. Vivian hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, Ms. Hayes, your grandmother was an extraordinary woman. I only met her once, toward the end, but her courage in the face of overwhelming odds was inspiring." With that, she left Ellie to her solitude. Alone for the first time since the attack at the bookstore, Ellie sank onto the bed, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She removed the medallion, the seal of the Guardians, and studied it in the firelight. The silver gleamed with an inner luminosity that seemed more pronounced than before, the crystal at its center pulsing gently like a second heartbeat. She thought of her grandmother, a woman she remembered only in fragments, a warm laugh, hands that smelled of herbs, bedtime stories that, in retrospect, had been far more than simple fairy tales. Had she known even then what Ellie would face decades later? Had she been preparing her granddaughter for this moment through those stories of brave women who stood between the world and darkness? And her mother, what trauma had she carried from witnessing her father's death during the Purge? How had that shaped her determination to keep Ellie away from anything supernatural, to raise her daughter in a world of science and rationality? Questions without immediate answers swirled in Ellie's mind as exhaustion finally claimed her. She slipped into sleep, still holding the medallion, its warm pulse synchronizing with her heartbeat as she drifted into dreams filled with wolves, boundaries, and a grandmother's voice whispering ancient words of power. In the darkness before dawn, Ellie awakened suddenly, the medallion hot against her palm. Outside her window, a large raven perched on the sill, its eyes reflecting the dying firelight with unnatural intelligence.
It tapped 3 times against the glass, a deliberate pattern that could not be mistaken for random movement. As Ellie watched, frozen between sleep and wakefulness, the bird tilted its head and spoke, not in caws or calls, but in a woman's voice that somehow emerged from its avian form. The time for choosing approaches, daughter of Eleanor. The boundaries thin. The hunter moves. Sacred Falls awaits. Then, with a spread of midnight wings, the raven launched itself into the pre-dawn sky, leaving Ellie to wonder if she had truly witnessed the impossible or merely dreamed it. But the medallion cooling in her hand suggested the truth. Her grandmother's plan was indeed in motion, and forces beyond her understanding were aligning to guide her toward a destiny written in Morgan blood centuries before her birth. Dawn crept over Thornwood Estate like a reluctant visitor, revealing the scars of the previous night's battle. Shattered windows gaped like wounded mouths, walls bore scorch marks from explosives, and blood, both human and lycanthrope, stained marble floors and priceless rugs. Pack members moved through the wreckage with grim efficiency, treating the injured, securing vulnerable areas, and gathering intelligence from fallen enemies left behind in the retreat. Ellie stood on the partially collapsed terrace outside the Great Hall, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in hues of amber and gold. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her body, sleep had proven elusive after the strange visitation in the night. The raven's message echoed in her mind. The time for choosing approaches. Behind her, voices carried from the estate's hastily established command center. Gabriel's deep baritone rose above the others as he coordinated with pack lieutenants, assessing casualties and reinforcing defenses against the inevitable next attack. 15 pack members wounded, 7 seriously, 3 dead, losses that Ellie felt as a heaviness in her chest, though she had never even learned their names. "You should eat something," Marcus said, appearing at her side with a steaming mug of coffee and a plate of eggs and toast. "Guardian abilities drain physical resources faster than normal. You need to replenish." Ellie accepted the offering gratefully. "Is that why I feel like I ran a marathon after maintaining that barrier for only 20 minutes? "Exactly. Your body is adjusting to channeling energies it wasn't previously aware of." Marcus leaned against the terrace railing, his own exhaustion visible beneath his casual demeanor. "Think of it like suddenly using muscles you never knew you had." "And these muscles get stronger with practice?" Ellie asked between bites. "With proper training, yes, which is why the journey to Sacred Falls is so important." He glanced at her. "Gabriel mentioned you had a visitor last night." Ellie paused mid-bite. "How did he know about the raven?" "Our security systems recorded it. Not many birds tap in Morse code on windows at 4 a.m. Marcus smiled slightly. "And fewer still speak with a woman's voice." "So I didn't imagine it," Ellie murmured. "It was real. Very real, and very significant. Lyra Blackfeather rarely communicates directly with anyone outside her territory. For her to reach out to you specifically means events are accelerating even faster than we feared." Ellie set down her mug, suddenly less interested in breakfast. "Tell me about her, about Sacred Falls. What exactly am I walking into if I agree to this journey?" "Lyra is difficult to describe to someone who hasn't met her," Marcus began. "She's the last of the old Cherokee shapeshifters, born sometime in the late 1800s, though she doesn't discuss her exact age. Unlike our kind, who follow bloodlines and pack structures, Lyra's people receive their gifts directly from the spirits of the land." "She can turn into a raven," Ellie stated. "Can all shifters do that? Choose different forms?" "No. Most of us have a single form determined by our bloodline. Wolves for the Thornwoods and other European-descended packs, big cats for some indigenous lineages, bears for others. The ability to assume multiple animal forms is incredibly rare, a gift granted to only a few in each generation." "And Sacred Falls?" Marcus's expression grew more solemn. "It's a place where the boundaries between worlds naturally thin, what some traditions call a thin place. A waterfall that flows through a cavern system deep in the mountains, its waters carrying energies that can awaken latent abilities in those with the right bloodlines." "Like me," Ellie said softly. "Like you," Marcus confirmed.
It's where guardians have traditionally completed their awakening for centuries, immersing themselves in the falls, communing with the memories and knowledge of their ancestors, fully accepting their heritage and responsibilities. The door to the terrace opened, and Gabriel emerged. Despite the night of battle, he moved with the same controlled power that seemed fundamental to his nature. His eyes, blue-gray in the morning light, but with hints of amber beneath, found Ellie immediately. "The preparations are complete," he announced. "We move at noon, assuming you've made your decision." The implicit question hung in the air between them. Ellie looked out over the forests and mountains that surrounded Thornwood Estate, the territory these people had protected for centuries, the boundaries they had maintained alongside her ancestors. "I dreamed last night," she said finally. "Not just about the raven. I dreamed about my grandmother, about conversations we had when I was very young, stories she told me that I'd forgotten until now." She turned to face them both. "She was preparing me even then, wasn't she? Planting seeds that would lie dormant until needed." "Eleanor Morgan was one of the most powerful guardians of her generation," Gabriel replied, "and one of the few who survived the purge. She knew the boundaries would continue to weaken without active maintenance. She would have done everything in her power to ensure the continuity of the guardian lineage, including manipulating her own granddaughter's life?" The question held no bitterness, only a desire to understand. "Not manipulating," Gabriel corrected gently. "Preparing, giving you the tools and knowledge you would need when the time came. But the choice has always been yours, Ellie. Free will is fundamental to guardian power. It cannot be coerced or controlled. That's precisely why Gray's experiments are so dangerous. They pervert the natural order." Ellie touched the medallion at her throat, feeling its familiar warmth against her skin. "Then my answer is yes. I'll go to Sacred Falls." Relief flickered across Gabriel's stoic features. "We leave in 3 hours. Pack light. Speed matters more than comfort. The journey will take us through 2 days of rough country, assuming we avoid Gray's patrols." "Which brings us to the route," Marcus said, pulling a topographical map from his jacket. He spread it on the terrace table, revealing detailed markings of terrain, trails, and territories. "The direct path is out of the question. Gray has established checkpoints along all the main routes since last night's attack." "We'll take the old Cherokee Trail," Gabriel decided, tracing a dotted line that wound through the most rugged sections of the mountains. "It hasn't been used in decades, but it should still be passable, and Gray's people won't know to watch it." "If we can find it," Marcus cautioned. "Those trails were deliberately obscured to hide from settlers." "That's where I come in," said a new voice. All three turned to see a woman standing in the terrace doorway, elderly but straight-backed, with silver hair tied in a long braid and dark eyes that held the wisdom of decades. She wore practical hiking clothes that somehow still maintained an air of ceremonial significance, and around her neck hung a medicine bundle decorated with beads and feathers. "Lyra Blackfeather," Gabriel identified her, surprise evident in his tone. "You've come far from your territory." "When boundaries weaken, territories matter less," the shapeshifter replied, her voice carrying the same resonant quality Ellie had heard from the raven. "And when a guardian awakens, old alliances must be renewed." She approached Ellie with measured steps, studying her with eyes that seemed to see beyond the physical. "You have your grandmother's spirit," she said after a moment, "and something else, something uniquely yours. Good. You will need both for what lies ahead." "You knew my grandmother," Ellie said, not quite a question. "Eleanor Morgan was my sister in all but blood," Lyra confirmed. "We walked between worlds together in the years before the purge, maintaining the boundaries that others sought to break." A shadow of old grief crossed her weathered features. "I was too far away to help when the attack came. By the time I reached her, she had already fled with your mother. And now you're here to guide us to Sacred Falls," Gabriel surmised. "To guide her," Lyra corrected, nodding toward Ellie. "The journey to awakening is different for each guardian. Some require solitude, others companionship. Eleanor's granddaughter needs witnesses, those who represent the alliance between shifter and guardian, between physical protection and metaphysical balance." She turned her penetrating gaze on Gabriel.
the alpha of the Shadow Pack, the protector whose bond with this guardian has already begun to form, though neither of you fully recognize it yet. Both Ellie and Gabriel shifted uncomfortably at this observation, though neither denied it. Since their first meeting, something had drawn them together beyond the immediate circumstances, a recognition that transcended ordinary interaction. "And me?" Marcus asked, a hint of his usual humor returning. "What's my role in this mystical journey?" "The bridge," Lyra replied without hesitation. "The one who walks between the Alpha's intensity and the Guardian's power, maintaining balance in the small ways that make great things possible." She smiled slightly. "Also, someone needs to keep you both from brooding silently for the entire journey." A tension-breaking chuckle rippled through the group, a moment of lightness amid the gravity of their situation. The brief respite ended as Vivian emerged onto the terrace, her expression tense. "We've intercepted communications from Ravenwood. Gray's forces have established complete control over the town. They're conducting house-to-house searches, taking anyone who resists to the old mining complex on the eastern ridge." "For conversion," Gabriel stated grimly. "They're expanding the Red Protocol testing." "It's worse than that," Vivian continued. "They've established some kind of broadcast system, towers positioned at key points around the town. Our scouts report headaches and disorientation when they get too close, even in human form. Mind control on a broader scale," Marcus concluded, "not just individual subjects, but attempting to influence the entire population." Ellie thought of Sarah, of the other townspeople she had met at the festival, ordinary people with no knowledge of the supernatural world, now caught in a power struggle beyond their understanding. "We have to help them." "We will," Gabriel assured her, "but we can't fight Gray's entire operation with our current resources, not directly. We need your fully awakened abilities, Ellie. That's our best chance of countering the Red Protocol and freeing those already under its influence." "He's right," Lyra agreed. "Gray's technology uses corrupted energy to override natural connections, between mind and body, between shifter and pack, between human and their own will. Only guardian magic can break those artificial bonds without harming the subjects." "Then we need to move," Ellie decided, determination hardening within her. "Every hour means more people under Gray's control." "First, you need proper equipment," Gabriel said, leading them inside. "The mountains are unforgiving, even in summer, and we'll be traveling through areas where technological advantages disappear." They descended to a lower level of the estate, entering what appeared to be a combination of armory and expedition outfitter. Pack members were already preparing supplies: lightweight backpacks, specialized clothing,